This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world options trading course. We're getting ready to go into our Sunday Laws of Game session, our Sunday game sermon. And what we're going to talk about is why either choice is the wrong choice for you. And, do a really quick disclaimer, at the top of this particular video. So if you're looking at the screenshot, you're looking at the graphic, I believe that's Tamika Mallory. I believe that's Candace Owens. This is not going to be a discussion in which we're going to attack both of them personally. So it's not about attacking them personally. So if that's what you're here for, you're on the wrong video or the wrong audio. There's other platforms where you can go on YouTube where they want to attack these two particular individuals personally. We're not attacking them personally. What we're going to talk about is what they represent. And what they represent is a choice that you can make, right, as a poor and working class black person. And we want to really talk to you about why we think either choice that they represent is going to be the wrong choice for you if you really desire to have certain things in this world and in this particular land that we call the United States of America. And so we're going to also present the problem. We're also going to present some solutions because we're solution oriented. So we want you to go ahead and follow what we're talking about. And if you agree to it or you disagree to it, let me know in the comments. So each choice is either going to be one, the TV media conservative, that's what's presented to us, and then the social justice liberal. And so we're given these two choices. So we're made to believe that what we want out of this world is going to be presented down the pathway created by these two choices. And I'm going to explain to you why both are bad choices and why they're both bad choices. So the real reason why both of them are bad choices is because they're both anti being in a position of power. So in both situations, right, that they're presenting, the alternatives, the solutions that they're presenting, they're both anti position of power. And let's go ahead and break that down. The TV media's conservative works, right, because their job is to confirm to a primarily white audience that black people position is justified because of behavioral issues. Now I'm gonna repeat that so people can understand it. The TV media conservative that we've primarily been seeing over the last, let's say 10 to 15 years, they work, right? They function, right? Because their job is to confirm to a primarily white audience, right, that black people's position in America is justified because of black people's behavior issues. They don't deal with economics. They don't really deal with the Second Amendment. They don't deal with anything structural. Their job is to be one, ahistorical, right? So they never show that history impacts black people's experience outside of talking about the Democratic Party historically, right? So have an ahistorical perspective, right? And then to also confirm to a white audience, a primarily white audience, that black people's position in society is justified because of black people being deficient from a behavior standpoint. And it creates a narrative that if black people just change their interpersonal behavior, that is the sole reason why they aren't allowed to participate in society fully. But we're going to go into deeper what their real final solution is for black people. Now we got the social justice liberal, right? And they work because their job is to confirm to poor and working class black people that their position exists because the people in position of power in society just don't understand their solution. So we're going to repeat that. So the social justice liberal works because their job is to convince poor and working class black people that their position exists because the people that are in power, who are primarily going to be Anglo-Saxons, right, don't understand their situation. And so therefore, if you can just get them to understand your situation, right, and sympathize with you, they will eventually help you change your situation. And both of their positions are incorrect. However, they're correct to get the result that they're proposing. So we're going to get a little bit deeper into that, but their position is correct to get the results that they're proposing are going to be a solution to black people. So they're not incorrect. They're correct. They're incorrect if you want to be in a position of power in this country. What we first need to do is kind of understand how this particular system works, because one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we spend a lot of time being distracted by a lot of stuff. Okay, so we want to understand this American system from a socioeconomic standpoint, right? It works because black people as a group are at the bottom of the society as a group. So we're not talking about individuals, because a lot of times we get caught up on individuals without understanding that the world that we live in is run by groups of people, and it's always been run by groups of people. The world that we live in is not run by individual people that are really, really successful. An individual person in this world has no power. In fact, they're very vulnerable. The world is run by groups of people. So the higher you go up in society, the more you're going to run into really, really coherent, well-working groups of people that know how to get what they want out of the world while working in a group dynamic. So this mentality that I'm an individual and therefore I don't do groupthink, right? That works if you're just going to be a mediocre or average person in this society. If you really want to get to the upper realms or the upper echelons of this world society, so not just U.S. society, but also world society, you got to understand that you got to move as a group. Because if you're one person and your opposition is a group, they're going to tear you apart. Why? Because you're by yourself. They'll just tear you apart, right? So one person who has a net worth of $100 million can't deal with 50 people who got a net worth of $10 million. Why? Because those 50 people will tear that one person apart, right? That's just how the world works. Okay, so as a group of people, black people in this society in America are at the bottom. And we don't want to believe that. We don't want to have conversations about that, but it's a reality. If you look at us from a socioeconomic standpoint, we look at us from a political standpoint, we are at the bottom of this society. And this country works because we're at the bottom. This country doesn't work without us being at the bottom. And so let me give you a parallel for you to understand that. If you look at the NFL, right? The NFL works because there's a team at the bottom of the NFL. The NFL works because there's a team at the top and there's a team at the bottom, and in between the bottom and the top, you got multiple teams. So that team at the bottom is a group of people. Can you have an individual player on that team that can be very exceptional? Yes. But at the same time, their team is at the bottom of the NFL. So Joe Thomas was a Hall of Fame left tackle for the Cleveland Browns. The majority of Joe Thomas' career, the majority of his playing career, the Cleveland Browns as a team and as an organization were at the bottom of the NFL. So you can't split Thomas's performance away from his team. He played on a team that was at the bottom of the NFL, even though his individual performance was really well. So at the end of the year, he was at the bottom of the NFL with his team. Now, he might have been the best player on the Cleveland Browns, but the team was still at the bottom. That's how the NFL works. So at the end of the year at the NFL, we know which team was at the top and we know which team was at the bottom. And then we can also rank the teams in between the top and the bottom. That's their system. The NFL does not have a system where multiple teams win a Super Bowl. That's not their system. Their system is designed to produce a single winner of the whole NFL schedule. That's their system. So you really got to understand the system that you're operating in. It's not about judgment of the system. It's about understanding the system that's operating. Currently, right now, we're having the NCAA tournament. The NCAA basketball tournament is designed to produce a single winner. So you keep playing games until you get to a single winner. So the first team that lost in the NCAA tournament is the worst team in the tournament. And the team that wins the tournament is the best team in the NCAA tournament. And then we rank all the teams. So the NCAA tournament does not work if there's not what? A bottom. Right? It doesn't work if there's not a bottom. We do not have a society where there's a top, but there's no bottom. Okay? So this society functions because it's figured out how to keep black people at the bottom of the society. And then what it also does is it gets black people to participate in keeping black people at the bottom of the society while promoting to themselves, promoting to other black people that they have a solution to white people or to justifying to white people, right? Okay, so let me repeat that. While promoting to black people that they have a solution for black people, which will still keep them at the bottom, or to relaying back to white people or Anglo-Saxons that the reason why black people are at the bottom is just because they have behavioral issues or they're aligned with the wrong group of Anglo-Saxons, right? So it's really interesting that an argument is that black people are at the bottom of American society because they're aligned with the wrong group of Anglo-Saxons, where therefore, if they align with the group of Anglo-Saxons that I think they should be aligned with, it improved their situation. But at the end of the day, they still all Anglo-Saxons. So I'm confused as how that works. Right? So let's move black people from dependency on one group of Anglo-Saxons to being dependent upon another group of Anglo-Saxons. But at the end of the day, you still dependent on a group of Anglo-Saxons. But that is their argument of how to improve the condition of black people. And so if you believe that being in a position of power is your real solution, then either choice is going to always be the wrong choice. Now, one of the things that they do to keep you from being focused on power is they run a lot of distraction campaigns. Because if you're distracted, then you don't build power. If you feel like you got a lot of other things going on in your life, you don't feel power. And then what we also do is we socially condition you for you not to even be comfortable being in power, or you don't desire power. So something that Amos Wilson taught us, right, is that you could take a black person, African person, Aboriginal person, whatever you want to call them, right? Moorish person, or whatever term or semantic term that you want to use. And we can socialize them and educate them at the finest Anglo-American, Anglo-Saxon, European institutions. We can educate them at those institutions. But because of socialization and conditioning, if we also educate an Anglo-Saxon in those same institutions, the Anglo-Saxon will come out of those institutions, right? These higher level institutions, they'll desire, one, to take territory from people. They will desire to create markets and control markets. They will desire to control economies and to create economic systems. And the black person that will come out of these institutions will just desire to, one, either integrate with those Europeans or just try to figure out how to make a lot of money. They will not desire to take territory from people. They will not desire to control markets and to create markets. And they will not desire to control economies and to create economies. They won't have that desire, even though they got the same, what we call equivalent education. Why? Because their socialization and conditioning is going to be different. So what we've done is that black people in this society have been at the bottom of this society for so long. They really don't desire power. And they've been made to believe that that's the last thing they should go after. So we run a lot of distraction campaigns. Now, let me give you some examples of some of the distraction campaigns and why you don't want to get consumed with these, because what you're arguing doesn't have anything to do with what's really going on. So let me give an example. And this is really where the dark persuasion comes in at. So after the George Floyd situation happened, a little over almost a year ago, we had this scenario where they talked about police defunding, right? And this narrative at, well, do you believe in defunding the police? Do you believe that the police should be defunding? And then people figured out, how did they stand on either side of this particular issue, right? Because they're asking you this for you to take a stance, not for you necessarily to play the fence or play the middle. And then based on your reaction to it, and that created more conversation, and, either this was a great idea or was an absurd idea, yada, yada, yada. This is the problem. And if you start to really understand civics and you understand how this particular society works, the argument should never be about defunding the police. So like somebody should ever go to me and say, David, how do you feel about defunding the police? That's the wrong argument. Why is that the wrong argument? Well, really the wrong question. Because a police union does not have I'm not obligated to give a police union my tax dollars once the contract between the municipality, the state, right, or the county has been completed. So therefore, as a taxpayer, I can petition to my politician to eliminate the current contract that we have with that particular police union at the completion of the contract. Why can't I do that? Because it's my money in the first place. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So policing in this society is done through police unions, or really fraternities, that have decided to pursue the occupation of policing. They form unions around that, and then they go and they procure a contract from a particular municipality, a state. Same thing with the correction system, or the county, the state, or municipality. And then in that particular contract, it defines what the terms of the contract are, what their compensation is going to be, what their benefits are going to be, yada, yada, yada. It's very, very specific. It's written up by really, really good lawyers, right? But the municipality agrees to that, and then they fund that particular contract primarily through tax dollars. Do they also get grants and things of that nature? Yes, right? But they primarily fund that contract to make sure that those officers receive compensation through tax dollars. So now, as a taxpayer, right? As a taxpayer, when the contract is completed, I can go to my political representatives and say, you know what? I want that contract to operate under different terms because I don't like the terms of the contract. Those officers of that police union, right? They can't come to me and say, well, you know what? We're entitled to your dollars. No, you're not. So the real argument is that, is a police union entitled to tax dollars once a contract has been completed? That's the real question. It's not about defunding the police, because as a taxpayer, I can tell my politician that I'm dissatisfied with how any agency of the government is performing, and therefore I want less of my tax dollars to go to that particular agency. Because even if a police department gets a grant, they get a federal grant to perform something or to buy some equipment. Well, where did the money come from? Politicians, the government doesn't have any money. All the money comes from taxpayers. So to get into this argument, right, whether or not we can defund the police. So what you're telling me is that as a taxpayer, I can't create discernment or discretion or authorize where my tax dollars are spent. I don't have the ability to do that. I'm just supposed to pay these people because they have essentially requested or put a demand on my tax dollars. I'm not arguing with you whether or not defunding the police is the correct thing to do. What I have the ability to do as a taxpayer is determine where my tax dollars get spent and to communicate to my elected officials how my tax dollars are being spent, where they're being spent, and how the people that are receiving my tax dollars, how they're performing with my tax dollars. I have the ability to do that as a taxpayer. I'm a trader. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to limit my tax liability because as a trader, I get taxed at a higher percentage than the average American worker, including police officers. So I really pay more in taxes if I don't do a lot of things to limit my tax liability than the average American, including police officers. But what I'm supposed to believe is that with me having a higher tax liability, if I leave everything right unchanged, I have a higher tax liability than the average American. And what I'm supposed to do is say, you know what? This particular group of people who receive their income from tax dollars, I owe them some money. Well, why do I? If I hire a contractor to do business with me and the contract is completed, I don't owe them another contract. So the fact that we've created a narrative that this group of people are owed income from taxpayers is ridiculous on its premise because nobody owes you any income inside the United States of America. You have to show that you are valuable enough to get some income. Nobody owes you anything. And if you can't get income in a particular area, then you need to go find a new area. So what we do is we get distracted because we let them frame the argument in a way in which distracts us. So the argument is framed around police defunding. Well, do you believe that the police should be defunded? What I believe is that as a taxpayer, I can authorize or not authorize how my tax dollars are spent. That's what I believe. Whether that's police department, sanitation, whoever. I have the ability to create that authorization. Why? Because the money comes from me in the first place. So if you look at the George Floyd situation, I heard that his family got around $20 million in a settlement from the city of Minneapolis for that situation. Well, you know what? That money didn't come from the police union. That money came from the city, which means it came from the taxpayers. So if I'm on the hook for their behavior, financially, I'm on the hook for their behavior, but then I can't determine whether or not we decide to remain in a contract with them. This doesn't make any sense from a business standpoint. But see, because you don't understand business and you really don't understand power, you argue over something that really on premise, the argument really is an incorrect argument. The argument should always be, right? Why do they think they deserve income at any time once their contract is extinguished? And when they're in the contract, their job is to perform well enough to get a secondary contract and a third contract. So anytime I'm contracting somebody, if they don't perform at a level that I think is adequate to get another contract, that's the last contract they get from me. Because I don't owe them any income. You're not owed any income inside the United States. So what we have is a union that has figured out how to put themselves in a position of power using political power, right? And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, using political power, without now they're able to craft a narrative that make it seem as if, right, they're owed income from taxpayers. How does that work? Next distraction. Well, we're doing the George Floyd case at this current time. And a lot of people are saying, or they're predicting, right? If the case doesn't go the way people think it should go, they should riot. Another distraction, right? People in positions of power don't spend a lot of time rioting. They don't. So this is a suggestion of how you should deal with this situation if you decide that, you know what, rioting is not going to be a solution to our problem. I don't care what part of the country that you live in. You got a local political representative, right? So you have a local congressperson. You call them and you let them know how you feel about the case. And then you explain to them your desire to see, you want to see a specific result from the case and how upset you will be if things don't go the way you want it to go. And how if things don't go the way you desire it to go, that you and your group are going to put somebody in position that are going to make sure that things go the way you want them to go. And then you just got to stand on it. What you don't do is riot, jump on social media, talk. You don't do that because that's not what people in position of power do. But see, you have to have a desire to be in power. And you have to believe that, right? The only way you're going to get what you want to get out of this society is being in power. So then what you have to do is tell your political representatives that this is the result you want. Because you see the same thing we talked about the police unions. They utilize a lot of political power. Why? Because they support a lot of politicians financially. So then they make sure that they get what they want in certain situations. Why? Because they've built the political power. Why? Because they understand the only way we can protect ourselves is to be in power. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? But what you're being taught to do is that if you have an issue with the police, you're supposed to jump on social media. You're supposed to let these social media activists, quote unquote, champion your cause, right? And then you as an individual person, right, are against a whole department that also has political relationships through financing of politicians, right? And then even if the city shows that the police officer was incorrect in their behavior and you get a judgment, you know what? The union's not on the hook for that financially. So who gives a F? They go right back to doing what they was already doing. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? Because you won't deal with the real scenario, which is what? How come this group of people, right, which is essentially a private organization that gets city and public money. So listen to what I'm telling you now. This is a private organization. These aren't military people. This is not the military, right? This is a private organization. These unions are private organizations that get access to public funding. And they've created a narrative that the public owes them the funding. How does that work? See, so when you don't understand power and you don't have a desire to be in power, you're going to always go down the wrong path. So now you need power in this world to do the things that we just talked about. What types of power do you need? You need one, economic power. You need political power. The United States of America, the U.S. territories, a corporation called the United States, is a political economy. And you got to build both economic power and political power at the same time. So we talked about the police unions. The police unions are not Apple. They're not Amazon. They're not Tesla. And even though they're not those scale of organizations with that kind of revenue going through those organizations on a year-to-year basis, they still did what? Built political power because they take the monies that they can take and they use that to support politicians. They don't just support politicians with their votes. They support politicians financially because they understand the only way we can go out here and do what we do, which is as a private organization, convince people that we are entitled to public funding, is to have a political representative that is on our team. Because like I said, you got to understand what's going on. You have a private organization that has convinced the public that they are literally owed public money. This is public money that they receive, right? These people are a private organization that is employed to do something on behalf of a municipality, a state, right? Or a county. Okay? So they get public money. They're going to call themselves public servants. Yes, they're employed as public servants, right? But just because you're employed as a public servant doesn't mean that the public owes you anything. Because you can become unemployed as a public servant and now you now are back into the private space, right? And you're not the only public servant that works for that particular municipality, county, or state, but they're the only one that is credited a narrative that they're owed. What do they do that with? They do that with economic and political power. So then when you have an issue with a cop and you're an individual, you don't have a chance in the world at getting any kind of real justice. Why? Because you don't have the group around you to be able to deal with that group. So you're wasting your time. So that's why you do all this social media stuff and you get with these attorneys that really, I don't even understand how they really function to get a result. So yes, George Floyd's family got $27 million. But like I said before, is that we have when you have power, right? You're able to bring about real change in the economy. And so if George Floyd's family gets $27 million, but things go right back to where they was at, then nothing has really changed outside of that individual situation. And we understand that what? Power in this world is not an individual situation. It's a group situation. Okay? When you're listening to either one of these two groups, you're listening to the media TV conservatives, you're listening to the social justice warriors on television. When does building real power ever come up in the conversation? When does it ever come up? When do they ever talk about building real power, building real economic power, and building real political power? When does that ever come up? Ask yourself that question. How come it never comes up? How come they talk about everything else except that? And then the question is, who's really behind both of these people? And you'll know why that never comes up. Who are these people trying to ingratiate themselves to, right? So they can further their career individually. And many of these people are representing one thing by actually being attached to another group of people, right? Who really they're working on behalf of that group of people. So let's take the TV media conservative that we currently see right now in 2021 that are very prominent, right? Whether it's on Twitter, YouTube, any of these particular type of television stations. If you look at them, right, philosophically, they're integrationalist. They're integrationalist, right? That's what they are philosophically. They promote themselves as being for black people, but in real life, they're integrationalists. And really what they desire is for black people to totally assimilate, right? And to have blackness essentially eliminated in America. That's really what their proposal is to have black people totally assimilate, because anytime we talk about building black power, they frame it as racism. Well, is it racism when Jewish people do it? Is it racism when Asian people do it? But when black people are talking about building a black political and economic power structure, then they say it's racism. But it's not racism when other groups do it. So the Asians have come in and dominated essentially black health and beauty inside the United States. They've dominated that, right? Is that racism? If you go down to the South, a lot of the East Asians have dominated the hotel industry. Is that racism? When they do that, is that racism? Because they're not looking to integrate into the larger society. They've created essentially a sector of the economy where them and their group of people can have an advantage, and they can have a position of power, and they can create jobs and employments for their people. Is that racism? Because they're doing that as a group of East Asians, as a collective group. That's racism. So what's funny is that when you're dealing with the TV media conservative, anytime we start talking about building any kind of black economic or political power, they frame it as racism. Why? Because really they're here to tell black people that we should just assimilate into American society and over time just eliminate blackness. So their final solution is to have 50 to 100 years and not even be any black people inside the United States. Why? Because we've so assimilated inside this country, essentially any kind of phenotypical differentiation that we have amongst other people just gets washed out. That's their final solution for black people. My only problem with them is they just won't come out and say that. I would respect them more if they just came out and be like, look here, I don't really desire to be black. I don't see an advantage in being black. And I think what black people should do is endeavor to try to figure out how to become more and more attached at the hip to Anglo-Saxons, right? And then we can eliminate the race problem because there just won't be any more black people inside the United States. And then I say, okay, well, now that I understand where you're coming from, that I can deal with you on that level. But you're really not for black people, because you don't believe that black people as a group should build any kind of economic and political power as a group. And you frame any efforts for black people to do that as racism, as black racism against white people. While every other group comes to this country and they've done the same thing, but you never talk about how that's racism, because like I said, is that their job is to communicate to their white audience that black people's position in America is justified because black people just have bad behavior. Now, the social justice person is also an integrationalist, right? They believe that black people, right, should continue to live at the bottom of society as a group. And then what they should do is get a little bit more from the power structure than what they're currently getting, right? So am I for universal basic income? Yeah, I'm also for you making as much money as possible. So I want you to make as much money as possible. And then if you also qualify for universal basic income, take that too. Just like I believe you should take every tax break you can get. So make as much money as possible and take every tax break you can get. What I don't believe that you should do is sit around and hope that you can appeal to a politician where they decide to give you $1,400 or $1,800 or whatever, because you'll starve waiting on those people, because their job is to keep you at the bottom of society. You understand me? So do I believe that the government should create programs to help people? Yes. I also believe that you cannot wait for that. You got to build power where you don't have to wait for it, because you see with other groups, right, whether they be ethnic groups or business groups, they don't wait for anything. They get it. They advocate, they lobby, they get it. Why? Because they built the power. They went about building the power to make sure that these political representatives give them what they want. So the social justice warrior black person, who's also an integrationalist, believes that black people should just be content with being at the bottom of society if they could just figure out how to get a little bit more from the government, right? In the form of some type of program or entitlement. And then they get promoted because what? They're helping keep black people at the bottom. Because like I told you before, this society don't work if we don't stay at the bottom of the society. It doesn't work. The same way that if there's not a team at the bottom of the NFL don't work. It doesn't work. Somebody got to be at the bottom. That's how it works. Somebody got to, we used to say this all the time when I played basketball. Somebody got to lose this game. We both can't win it. So we just going to keep playing till somebody loses. Because one thing about basketball is I don't know if we have a maximum of overtime periods, but I don't think I've ever seen a basketball game end in a tie. You normally keep playing till somebody wins, right? So we used to always say somebody going to lose, because the game is set up where somebody got to come out a loser and somebody got to come out a winner. You understand me? So we live in a society where somebody has to be at the bottom. And what we do is that the people that are in control of this society, they promote people based on them convincing another group of people, right, why, one, you should stay at the bottom, or why this group of people is at the bottom, and then therefore you should feel better about yourself because you're unlike this other group of people that, because of their behavioral issues, right, they're at the bottom of society. Both of these people are anti-power, and essentially they're playing a duopoly game. So Tamika Mallory, right, is designed to bounce you to Candace Owens. And Candace Owens is designed to bounce you to Tamika Mallory. So if you are a black person, right, and you may be tired of the Democratic Party and the way in which they've dealt with black people, and I can understand that, right? So you may be tired of the Democratic Party and the way in which they've totally really disregarded black people politically, economically, right? And I can understand that. But you hear some things about Tamika Mallory, right, that you don't necessarily agree with. On top of the fact that you're dissatisfied with the Democratic Party, your choice is supposed to be somebody like Candace Owens. That's supposed to be your choice. That's what you're supposed to go to. Okay? Then if you don't necessarily like the type of stuff that Candace Owens talks about, how she's very disrespectful to black people, and I understand, I know what team she's playing for, and how she's very disrespectful to black people, and how she's very dismissive of black people, and how she kind of is using black people as a stepping stone to get what she wants in the world, which really doesn't make her any different than the same people that she's attacking, but it is what it is. And you don't like that, then you're supposed to go to people like Tamika Mallory. So you're not really given a real choice, and because you don't know that other choices exist. And I'm here to tell you that other choices do exist, but you got to decide, and you got to start understanding that the only way to really protect yourself in this society is to build up some kind of power. Right? And you got to build it as a group. And it don't mean that you got to build with every black person inside the United States. That's not what this means. Right? You can take 5 people and y'all can build power. You and your 5 group of people, y'all can figure out how y'all going to build some power in y'all local geographic area. Right? Because I keep telling people all the time, there is no area in the country where black conservatives have a piece of real estate that we can all go live on as black conservatives. Doesn't exist. Why? Because they're integrationalist. So it can't exist. So they can never propose that we're going to create a black conservative area where black conservatives are going to go live our lives and build power and build economic stability as black conservatives. Because why? Their white audience don't want to hear about that. Right? Because they have to communicate to their white audience that black people's behavior is the reason why they're failing in America. So that we can't propose any kind of initiatives that is going to be about us building any kind of social economic power, because why? They lose their audience, because their audience is not black people. Their audience is white folks and a few black people sprinkled in, but it's not primarily white folks. It's not primarily black folks, I meant to say. Same thing with Tamika Mallory. The people that are promoting her and are putting her at the forefront, she can't tell black people how to really go build power. She can't propose that. Why? Because she loses her support. So her job is to continue to organize black people to be content with being at the bottom of society, but she's going to help them get a little bit more. So George Floyd's family gets $27 million. It don't change, right, policing. It is not about attacking individual police officers. It's about understanding, right, the way they built this structure is incorrect, right? Because one, you got a bunch of people that think that they're owed money, they're owed income, they're owed jobs. How in America? I do too much business. God forbid a contractor ever try to communicate to me that I owed him something. I owe you what's on the contract. I don't owe you anything past that. Right? And you got to show me with the contract that you're performing at a level for you to get a next contract. Because you are contracted. Right? And you don't have a contract that states that, you know, you have an indefinite contract to work. No, we don't do that. You work for a specific amount of time. We evaluate your performance and we decide it. The problem with policing is that they've created a narrative that they're the only people in the world that can do policing. The question is, if somebody trained you to do it, we can train somebody else to do it. They don't want me to get on top of the policing because I will privatize the whole thing. Won't be no public policing. I will privatize everything. And I'll fire everybody and make everybody reapply. And most of them ain't going to make the cut. You understand me? So the reason why they want to keep this scenario public is because if the market ever really gets hold of policing, the majority of them will not be able to police as a profession. They have to go do something else. And in my opinion, if they could actually do something else and make a certain amount of money, they go do that. So the reason why they're doing what they're doing is because they really can't do anything else. And a lot of people are going to say that's a disrespectful statement. No, I just look at markets. I just look at markets. I don't take it personal. I just look at the market. You understand me? So what we're doing is that we're not building power to be able to create these kind of changes in our life. We get caught up in playing the game between these two different bad choices. They're both the wrong choice. They're anti-power choices. And then they now come at you with things that they're saying are going to be solutions to your problem. It is really a distraction from a actual solution to your problem, which is what? To build economic plus political power. You cannot just build economic power without a political apparatus to support it. You got to have politicians on your team. Politicians are prostitutes. You use them for what you want to use them for, and you let somebody else use them. You don't develop a personal affinity for them. How do you care about a politician that you don't know personally? It don't make no sense. They're a prostitute. Weirdos like prostitutes. Weirdos try to create personal relationships with prostitutes, right? Politicians are prostitutes. That's their job. Their job is to take money and to perform. That's their job. So my question is, how come you're not putting them on their job? How come you're not giving them money and telling them to go perform something for you? When that's their job, they don't even understand how to talk to you because you ain't putting them on their job. So that's why they talk to you like they're crazy, because you don't know how to put them on their job. Give them some money. Tell them, look, this is what I need you to go do. And they'll do it and come back and say, I need some more money. What do you need me to do? Then you build up the economic, then you build up political. You don't try to build the political without the economic. Why? Because you don't have any money to put the politician on their job. So they don't listen to anything you do. Why? Because they looking to get paid. So when you got a prostitute who understands that my job is to get paid and you don't have no money, then why would they do what you tell them to do? So you're dealing with a prostitute. So a lot of y'all are so gameless, you don't even realize that you're dealing with a prostitute. So you trying to negotiate with a prostitute with no money, and you ain't talking about money. And you wonder why the prostitute ain't listening to what you got to say. Okay? So the solutions to the problem is this. Decide that you really want power. You got to decide that you want power. You got to get over, right, your apprehension of building power. And that's something that, I would teach students in my dark persuasion class. You have to get over your apprehension of building power. Building power can be a dangerous game But the only way that you're going to protect you and your people and your children is to build power. That's the only way you can protect them, right? You need to define the power that you want. Define it. Don't let somebody else tell you what power is. You got to define it. So when you start talking about political and economic power, what does it look like to you in your world? What does economic power look like to you? What does political power look like to you? Because you're being organized and aggregated by two people that have already defined what power is to them, what they want, and that they're doing a job to get the power and to get the economic success that they desire. They've defined it. You haven't defined it. Then you got to go after it and make it something important in your life. Other groups have come to this country and they you know what they said? We got to build power over here. This is one of the few places in the world where we can build political power and our whole group won't be killed off by government forces. There's other parts of the world where you try to build any kind of political power and the government will show up and kill all of y'all. Or they'll poison you like that type of stuff they're doing over there in Russia. This is one of the few places in the world where you can actually go build some political and economic power and they won't just come kill you. Has that happened in the past? Yes, it has happened in the past. But that doesn't mean it's happening right now today. And you also got to implement a self-defense program, but that's not the topic of this particular course, right? That's not the topic of this broadcast. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? But if you're not going to build the self-defense because you're scared to actually build power, then don't use the fact that what happened in the past as an excuse for you not building the power because you don't want to do the work to build the power. It takes work. It's not going to happen overnight. So these people have already factored in that you're not going to do the work to build the power. You're not going to do the work to build the economic power, and you're not going to build the work to build the political power. So then therefore they can do things to you and you're not going to do nothing back to them. They've already factored it in because if they was worried about you doing something, they wouldn't be doing what they was doing. They wouldn't offend you the way they offend you. They wouldn't disrespect you the way they disrespect you. They wouldn't work against your interests the way they work against your interests. Why? Because they would be worried that there's going to be a repercussion behind me doing something against this group of people. Right? So it don't matter how much you troll these people on social media, how much you speak against them. You don't have a way to do something against them in the real world. And I'm not advocating for violence. I don't mean that. But Candace Owens is trying to move up in the media world. If she says the wrong thing against the wrong people, she'll lose her media career. And she knows exactly who those people are. So she knows to never say that. It don't matter what happens in the world. You don't speak on that. Why? Because these people will pull your plug media-wise. They get you up out of here. Why? Because they built the power. Tamika Mallory has relationships with certain groups of people that are supporting her activism career. And she understands that if I go against them, I'll lose all my support. Why? So I don't never say nothing against them. She knows what she's doing. That comes from the fact that they built the power and they made that important in their life. Right? So if you want to build power, consider disregarding any messaging that is anti-power building. That's if you desire to build it. If you just want your life and the life of your family to be, you're just going to be a cork or I forgot what you call that thing that you fish with, where it just sits on the top of the water and it just floats with the current. And that's what you want your life to be, then don't worry about building power. But people that actually want a direction in their life, they want their life to go under some type of direction, right? They focus on building power. What we're taught is that our life don't have no direction. It's being controlled by other groups of people. It's being controlled by a supernatural force. And therefore, you should just go with the flow and take things as they come. And the majority of people that think that way, or the majority of those people are at the bottom of every society in the world. And you really got to understand that. The people at the top of societies in the world, they believe that they have a direction in their life that's based on the things that they're implementing in their life. They 100% believe that. While they communicate to the masses of the world that you don't have no direction in your life just goes the way it's supposed to go based on these outside forces. You understand that? So that's going to be the Sunday game sermon, The Laws of Game. This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world. Hit me up in the comments whether you agree or disagree. Like I said before, this is not an attack on these two individual women. It's an attack or really a critique of what they represent. Not about these two women, because I know how this system works. We can move those two women out and replace them with two more women, and the system going to keep on going, right? Because these women are not originals. I've seen this before. Talk to you later.